When I sit down with MODs, chiefs of defense or presidents, I learn from them. They tell me what their approach is to terrorism. And I figure out, and they tell me how AFRICOM can help.
All right, so it's about countries perhaps taking up their own autonomy. General, let's talk about countries taking on their own autonomy. You are on African soil, not for the first time, but this would be a good moment to ask about one of the countries that has taken its own autonomy, and that's Burkina Faso. Yeah. Your remarks recently at the Senate seem to suggest that he's diverting, General Traore, is diverting its 4 billion gold reserves to sustain his military rule rather than for public welfare. These remarks sparked widespread condemnation across the continent. What did you mean by that statement?
Let me speak to Burkina Faso's sovereignty. They maintain their sovereignty. They make their decisions how they use their resources. They make their decisions who their resources go to for military support. That's their sovereign right. But my cautionary tale was just from a military perspective. That was a Senate Armed Services Committee asking me a direct question. Burkina Faso, a lot of great things going on to progress them forward, okay? But then when you look at the military part of it, knowing that that's the epicenter of global terrorism, it was my time to illuminate that this is probably their weakest point, and there needs to be sufficient resources going towards for the whole fight of terrorism in that country, period. They make their decisions, though. That's their sovereignty and their sovereign right to make their decisions, what is appropriate, what's not. But I wanted to illuminate that it's going in the wrong direction now. ISIS is getting stronger. JNIM is getting stronger. Al-Qaeda in the lands of the Maghreb is getting stronger in that country.
And do you think it's getting stronger after General Traore took over?
It has. Just look at the numbers of attacks. It really has, since 2022. I've been tracking this since I took command. So, no ill will towards him, but the decisions is their own. They're looking for other ways to be able to, they're still on warfighting footing, but it's just going to take more resources.
So you stand by that statement? Because there's been pressure on you to walk those statements back.
That's my statement. That's my assessment. That it's getting worse. More needs to be done for not just local, but whole of country, because of these violent extremist organizations are seeking revenue, they're seeking resources, they're seeking recruiting from the Burkinabe people, and they're seeking refuge within their country. That threatens their sovereignty.
And that threatens America's interest?
Say again?
Does that then threaten America's interests?
Yes, thank you for asking that.
Uh-huh.
Because especially ISIS, and of course in East Africa, is inextricably linked all the way to ISIS West Africa, ISIS Sahel. And there's going to be probably a move of foot for them to move and seek refuge within the line. So we have shared objectives, and we offer to work together with the Burkinabe government and border countries. Mali, Niger, coastal West Africa countries, collective, because here's what these organizations do. Here's what these terrorist organizations do. They seek refuge in the seams or the borders of these countries. It lets them thrive and grow. It lets them recruit, gain resources to carry on their illicit and nefarious activities against the populations of those people.
And what would America, perhaps AFRICOM, be prepared to do? Would you be considering an ouster like we saw with Muammar Gaddafi in Libya? Because there's still many Africans who are yet to recover from that. If this is a bigger threat, as you say, in Burkina Faso, what is AFRICOM prepared to do about it?
We do indications and warnings. There's a number of activities that we do, and we'll just go ahead and mention building institutional capacity. It's not going to be U.S. boots on the ground. Very, very small for exchange of ideas and training, exercises. Over time, that builds institutional capacity and capability in these armies. There, AFRICOM, we are working towards a burden sharing and a burden shift for their independent operations. That's our goal. We have the shared objectives because these same terrorist groups can threaten our homeland. So we're in concert. I was just in African Lion over in Morocco. A number of countries working together.
Is Burkina Faso invited here today for this conference?
Yes. They were invited to African Lion in Morocco. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Like I said, we're moving forward.
Okay.
We're moving forward because we have that shared goal of defeating terrorism.
All right. Speaking of that, because the reaction out of the statements that you made about Burkina Faso were several African leaders feeling you are speaking on sovereignty issues that America shouldn't be. And as a result, there are those who see the role of Africa as less of a partner in, the war against, shared threats, as you mentioned, and more of a protector of Western or American economic interests that allows access to Africa's vast mineral resources, and as more of a paternalistic relationship than one of respect amongst peers. What would you respond to that? I respond that there's others on the globe that do that. There's others on the globe that do that. I'm going to bring it up. We should even already know, okay? But I'm going to bring that up. Okay. We respect the sovereignty. We respect their decisions. We respect their decisions of who they choose as a security partner. And then we measure the common denominator that's keeping these countries across the Sahel from progressing forward. In 2050, the largest workforce on the globe is going to come out of the continent of Africa. The youth need hope. They need peace and stability so they can hit their potentials. That's a long-range goal of AFRICOM as we look to help these countries set those conditions for stability and security so prosperity can be presented to all the populations and the youth. Pan-Africanism is real and it's strong, and there's an opportunity to come up on the global stage, and this continent can do it. That's what we really envision. So you're not concerned about China and Russia expanding their military and economic influence across the continent? We are concerned about it, yes. What about it concerns you? Well, their influence. Their influence may not be looked upon as being a positive influence. For who? For America or for Africa? Well, for Africans, okay? And then, so Americans have that in mind, that for the African people and across all countries, be able to hit their maximum potential and independence and sovereignty and also freedoms by rules-based international order, being able to get on the global stage and take a leadership role and provide for the people in peace and stability. Some of those aims are not the same as the approach of those other countries on the global stage. So that's my perspective. Do you have a counter strategy?
Do we have a counter strategy as far as to
China, Russia, their presence, because you say it doesn't align with the shared values?
Well, what we watch is it does not, the continent of Africa does not need to be militarized, let's put it that way. Does not need to be militarized. So we watch, as far as security agreements and what does it mean? Is it really for the stability to fight the threats of a African country, or is it for them and their ability to establish a global hegemon of basis? That's what concerns us.
We'll have to leave it there for now. Thank you very much. Right. General Michael Langley, thank you very much for speaking with us on Citizen Television. Members of the African intelligentsia, I greet you. I went ahead and played the entire clip, not the entire interview, but the entirety of the clip of that interview concerning his remarks against Burkina Faso and Captain Ibrahim Traore using his country's gold reserves to build up his own military capacity. Now, I played that clip, about a 10-minute clip, because I didn't want anybody to say that, oh, I took his remarks out of context. So, there were a few things I wanted to take from that interview. First and foremost, I don't know if you watched the body language, but General Michael Langley is either drunk or laced or both. But his discourse didn't flow smoothly, like somebody that really believes in what he's saying. He sounds to me as though he was given a number of talking points, over prepared for this interview, but not prepared at all as far as the questions that were thrown at him and his ability to really answer them honestly. That's my concern. Was he able to honestly answer those questions? Was he able to answer those questions honestly? And for me, that would have to be a no. I think he answered them arrogantly, and I think he tried to piece talking points together that were given to him by his bosses. I don't know if you've paid attention to every time you saw Michael Langley appear somewhere, whether it was at the Senate Armed Services Committee hearing where he made those remarks about Traore, or whether it was his recent visit to Ivory Coast. But every time you see Michael Langley appearing somewhere, you see a whole lineup of white chiefs of defense behind him. That means he himself is a puppet, and they are the ones pulling the strings, but from right under him. My assessment is that Michael Langley will soon be replaced because he has outlived his usefulness. He will soon be replaced. This interview was a disaster, a complete disaster. He looked like he was on the back foot with this interview. And so what's going to happen is that Michael Langley is most likely going to fade out into a white commander. Or else they might replace him with another black one for the time being until they can get African chiefs of defense to sign everything, to get African chiefs of defense and heads of state on board with everything they want to do. And once they've signed those agreements with a black-faced general, then when they replace the black-faced general with a white-faced general, then they will be like, yes, you signed these agreements not with Michael Langley or with whosoever, but you signed these agreements with AFRICOM, and that's the United States Command, that's the United States African Command. And so you have to abide by these agreements. That's the point of putting a black face over AFRICOM. But you look to see Michael Langley replaced here shortly, because they will say that, man, it looks like you're not able to really handle this.
moving forward. At the beginning of this clip that we just heard, Michael Langley said that when he meets with defense chiefs from Africa, he learns from them. I'm concerned about that claim. You learn from them? So, what did you learn from Ibrahim Traore the last time you sat down with him to discuss the issues that he is facing along with the other leaders of the Sahel? What did you learn from Assimi Goita? What did you learn from a military veteran such as General Chiani of Niger? General Chiani has many, many decades of military experience under his belt. He's a general like yourself. Assimi Goita was a colonel when he took over in Mali. The best people to talk to you about the issues in the Sahel would be the current men who are the military leaders of the Sahel. I think you can see that those men are not your regular 1980s, 1990s African military coup leaders, rebel leaders. I think you can see that they're doing some good things. Michael Langley himself admitted that Traore is doing some very good things to move the country forward. Okay, so that should tell you that he has the interests of his country at heart. Just because he's wearing a military uniform doesn't mean he's a rebel leader. So, what did you learn from Traore, General Langley, when you sat down with him to talk about the issues in Burkina Faso? And now you're saying that you invited him to this Chief of Defense conference in Kenya. So, after you have made these disparaging remarks about the young leader, then you invite him to your Chief of Defense conference to say what? To teach him what? No, he's not going to attend because you've insulted him already. You've disparaged his character already. He's not going to attend. So, the next thing I want to talk about is this meeting of African chiefs of defense from across the continent. I mentioned to you, members of the African intelligentsia, in a previous short video, that they're preparing to attack the Sahel. And I will tell you that there's several of these backdoor meetings that they're having with chiefs of defense from all over the continent. You heard General Langley say earlier in this interview, not in this clip, but if you watch this entire interview with Kenyan television, and I will post the link in the description box to the full interview. You heard him say earlier that they had this conference last year in Botswana. So this is not even just a West African thing. AFRICOM is getting all of the African chiefs of defense on board with what they're planning to do in the Sahel and with how they're planning to handle this continent going forward. They want to be able to extract their resources out of here with no issues. So Africa needs peace and security, not for Africa's own benefit. When you hear them talk about peace and security, not for Africa's own benefit, but for them to be able to get their resources out of here smoothly with the cooperation of African heads of state and with the cooperation of African militaries. And this business of all these meetings, these backdoor meetings with African military leaders should concern you. Okay. You heard the interviewer. And at this juncture, I would really like to congratulate Yvonne Okwara. The name of the interviewer is Yvonne Okwara. Yvonne Okwara did a masterful job. And I will tell you that because I'm a journalist myself by profession. I'm a trained journalist by profession. Yvonne Okwara did a masterful job. Yvonne, I want to personally thank you from the bottom of my spirit. Thank you for the questions that you asked that exposed what's going on here. Girl, you are fearless. You are fearless. and I want to thank you. There were remarks in the comment section. I'm going to stop watching your channel. Why did you bring this individual on here? And I understand those comments. People are so upset about the remarks Langley made about Traore. But these kinds of interviews, you have to draw your enemies in so that they can tell you what they're doing. How do you get to understand what they're doing? Where do you find this kind of information if you don't interview them? So thank you, Yvonne. And now, you heard General Langley state categorically that there would be no American boots on the ground. So Yvonne asked him, so you're concerned about this situation in Burkina Faso. What are you prepared to do about it? And she prefaced the question, because what you did about it in Libya, a lot of Africans are still recovering from how you handled the situation in Libya with Gaddafi. So now Langley is saying, no, there'll be no boots on the ground. That means we're not going to attack. Just a very small contingent, for exercises and things like that. Members of the African intelligentsia, they are planning to invade the Sahel. And Langley is categorically lying. Okay? That's a lie. There will be boots on the ground. And even if they're not boots on the ground, there will be tanks on the ground. There'll be drones in the air. He lied. All right. Last thing I want to mention, and there's a lot in here, but I just wanted to take out these key points. You heard him say at the end, when asked about Russia and China's military and economic influence on the continent of Africa, you heard him say, Africa just doesn't need to be militarized. Oh, really? So Africa doesn't need to be militarized. But the bastion of democracy, the United States, Great Britain, France, all of y'all need to be militarized. Every time there's a small protest somewhere, especially when our people are involved, y'all show up with the entire military, the entire SWAT team, everything. Y'all show up. So y'all need to be militarized. On top of that, y'all need bases in our countries. But we don't need to be militarized, except for, armies that have to handle local squabbles and things like that. Is that what you're saying? We don't need to be militarized. You think freedom comes cheap? You think freedom comes easy? You think freedom comes free? That is patently disingenuous of you, Michael Langley, to say that Africa doesn't need to be militarized. It's patronizing. It's paternalistic. Your statements are contradictory. On the one hand, you're saying that the situation in Burkina Faso is getting worse and that Traore is not handling the situation capably. On the other hand, you're saying that more resources, the solution you're offering is that more resources need to be deployed to handle the situation effectively. So the young man says, okay, I'm getting my resources from elsewhere. You have a problem with that? But you're saying that he's using his $4 billion gold reserves to sustain his military junta. No, he's using the money to handle the fight against terrorism. As you rightly say, more resources need to be deployed to handle the situation effectively. Or are you upset because he's not getting those resources from you? Because he's not getting his strategy from you? Because that's y'all's thing as the United States of America. As long as people don't involve you, the situation is getting worse. As long as people don't look to you for support and guidance and breast milk and money, then they must be doing something wrong. So your discourse concerning Traore is conflicting. Is conflicting. Yes, he does have a problem on the ground. And yes, he is handling it. He goes to bed and wakes up in the morning handling it. And yes, he is getting his resources. He does have to use some of the country's resources to get his equipment from elsewhere to be able to handle the situation effectively. He has to. What do you expect him to do? Come to you? You've completely ignored the fact, you did not mention to Yvonne the fact that your people, your troops were on the ground in these Sahelian countries for years. You never handled the issue. It did get worse on your watch. So how now do you come to pontificate on national Kenyan television to the continent of Africa that suddenly you have the resources and you have the training and you are able to offer an effective way forward? How? How come y'all didn't handle it when y'all were on the ground